Hi, those of you at home. I'm Marlo Barrera. I am the Essentials Fellowship Coordinator. Last year was my 1-year anniversary, so I haven't met many of you.
Awesome.
Although yesterday,
Yeah.
sorry, time is running all sorts of ways. Yesterday was my 1-year anniversary, so I haven't met many of you, and I'm excited to share what Essentials has been about for the last year and what we're looking forward to. 2019.
Yeah. I'm Rachel Van Paris, and I am the Tiny Fellowship Coordinator. I started about 2 weeks after Marlo, so I am just about to hit my 1 year with 4.0, and am likewise just really excited to talk about the changes we've made with Tiny over the past year and see where we're headed in the future.
Yeah. We've been talking about this a lot, this podcast, and what this could mean or look like. And I think one thing that's most interesting to me about this work is sort of all of the different ways that people come to it. So our why, which we do talk a lot about in Essentials. So what's your why, Rachel? What's your deal?
What's my deal? Well, my background is originally in public health, so I had been familiar with 4.0 for a number of years, but didn't know too much about what was going on here, and I got really burnt out working in public health and knew I needed to find another way to channel my interests in community-based organizations and in supporting like small community-run organizations. So I was looking for different options, and I came across this position to run Tiny, and at first I was like, yeah, that sounds kind of interesting, but it actually is a perfect fit. This is my dream job, and I feel like my why is that I was really privileged to have a very good public education growing up and had the chance to go to a great college, to go to graduate school. And despite my massive amounts of student loan debt, I really didn't have any obstacles in my way. I only had opportunities. And that's certainly not the case for a lot of people in this country, and especially folks who lived right down the road from where I grew up. So it's really exciting to be a part of an organization and working with lots of different organizations that are trying to change what that looks like. Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't think I've heard that whole story.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about how you came to this, especially given that your background was also in a lot of like the health world.
Yeah. I feel like every time I'm asked this question, I have a really different answer about my why. But I grew up in New Orleans, born and raised, and my post-Katrina experience was one that a lot of luck and privilege played into my entire trajectory to today. And I am just really lucky to have had access, or really privileged to have had access to a lot of what I had access to. And so post-college, I worked in kitchens for a long time. And that, in its many ways that I'm sure folks have heard of the kitchen experience and maybe have been in it, like, can fuel a lot of anger and frustration at the sort of misogyny of those spaces. And so because of that, I started doing community organizing work, focusing on reproductive health and rights, which then, as I learned more about my own identity and also just the work generally and how I fit into and showed up in my community, turned into reproductive justice work. And so that's what I have been doing and continue to do, and happened to come across 4.0. I didn't know about 4.0, unlike you, before applying. I found out about it on Idealist and was like, this seems interesting. And I had, I think, a healthy amount of skepticism for most of the very long interview process, and then was just so delighted by the amount of love and care and intentionality that this group of people brings together in a way that I hadn't experienced ever before. That sort of just like blew me away and got me really excited about this role and just getting to work with folks who are doing just really badass work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that intersection of like education justice with everything else is something that I find myself talking about a lot with everyone on the team. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we both kind of came to this because of interest in like these other community issues, and that education is so tied into health and infrastructure and obviously things like reproductive justice and just trying to pull all those things together. And this is a really exciting way to actually try and move the needle on these things and hopefully make things a little less shitty.
Yes. In a world where things are a little less traumatic.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah. Should we talk a little bit about what we're up to with Tiny and Essentials right now, and then we can get more into the nitty-gritty of what's interesting about it?
Yeah.
Cool. And share about Tiny?
Sure. So with Tiny, we are currently in the middle of Tiny Wave 5, which is really exciting. It is our largest cohort to date. We have 40 different teams that we're working with, which is really exciting. Teams across the entire country. I think we have 22 or 23 states, and at this point, we're about halfway through the fellowship, so they are starting to run their pilots or finishing up the planning. So this is a really exciting time where over the next couple weeks, we're going to be getting lots of pictures and results of what folks are testing with their communities. So we've got some really interesting schools and ed tech and different kinds of programs and tools and resources for teachers. So we're at like kind of the tipping point of this really exciting time where we actually get to see all the hard work and planning come together. And on my end, I'm also really excited because I am getting to start to make some changes and plans for Wave 6, which will be next year, and really getting to plan what that's going to look like and be able to be more intentional about taking the feedback that we've been getting and make those changes. I'm also building out a little resource library, so working on all kinds of new case studies and examples and readings and equity resources for fellows and for our team as well. So lots of projects going on, but it's a really exciting time, and I'll try to not use the word exciting 1,000 times because that's how I talk about this work a lot.
Yeah, me too. I think people get probably pretty annoyed with all the exclamation points in my emails, but I mean every single one of them.
Yeah.
What was your favorite moment at Tiny Camp, this most recent one?
Yeah, so our Tiny Camp this year was in September, and it's hard to pick one moment, partly because it's just a whirlwind. It is a very quick, about like 36 hours with our teams. But I think maybe what was among the most fun was that Saturday of Tiny Camp this year was my birthday, and it was just really fun to get to spend that with like 63 fellows from all over the country and have a really kind of hard, long day of doing work together and get to end with this like happy hour and celebration. And I just felt like really surrounded by amazing people who are doing incredible work in their communities. And I got to have a really nice cake, so it's a pretty perfect day.
Yeah, that was a really fun day.
It was great.
And that was a good cake.
It was a great cake.
It was of the giant fat gray cat that sits on its back legs, right?
Yeah, I have a weird talent for finding very cute and strange animals on the internet, and Bruno was this extremely obese cat who likes to stand on his back paws, and that's what was on my cake because that's special.
It is special.
I'd love to hear more about where you're at with Essentials and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah. Man, Essentials, we had 81 fellows over 4 cohorts this semester. I think about, God, I've been here exactly 1 year, and I think that I've been through like 10 essentials, which is sort of wild in
Yeah.
that amount of time. But yeah, we did 4 camps in 5 weeks with 81 people from all across the country, doing really incredible, exciting, just resistance work through education and liberation work through education. And Matt thinks that this is a mirror, and we're not going to tell him that it's not a mirror. Classic. And so, yeah, so people just doing really incredible work. And so the Essentials experience has been a lot about... a lot about just how we can incorporate, or the lens I've been using is how we can center like liberation in the work that we do, right? And I was at this dinner last night that I sort of started to tell you about, and there's an organization in New Orleans called IOS, where Rachel actually worked once, Institute for Women and Ethnic Studies, and their executive director Denise was there, and she brought up how all of their work is trauma-centered and trauma-informed because we live in an inequitable world, and if you've experienced inequities and you've experienced trauma. So as I think of the last semester being about like liberatory work, I also think of how we can move forward in the future to think of like trauma-centered work and how we can provide those resources for our fellows of what that can look like and what that could be. Because I think of how, I mean, this semester our fellows are in the process of running their pop-ups, which is really beautiful and wonderful to see the photos. We have a whole wall back here just full of photos we printed out like someone's grandma that we've printed out from emails and Slack. And last semester we had 500 students across the country in pop-ups just from that semester's worth of fellows. So I'm not sure how many yet for this semester, but I think of how we can, what resources we can provide to ensure that like that students and that people, just folks who are learners, can just like be, we can create spaces where folks can be more themselves.
Yeah, and bring their full selves to that space and feel supported.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time. I don't think I'd heard that number before of last semester, how many students were part of these pop-ups. It's really exciting when you think about it in those terms of, you know, we work with up to 40, 80 people a semester, and what that actually cascades out into is something that I forget sometimes. But that's really special.
And is especially, you know, we go in these execution modes of doing 1 million camps, and Tiny was one weekend after our last Essentials camp. It was immediately after. So we have these like high execution moments, and then all these people, these amazing folks disperse and do the work. And then we have these lulls where we're taking all that feedback and making the programming more of what it should be and more of what it can be. But then for me, I just feel so far removed, and just like I think about taking next semester off to get to iterate, and how luxurious and wonderful and amazing that's going to be, and also how far away I already feel from our fellows. I miss them.
Yeah, I think if it were up to me, I would just spend like 80% of my time just like following our fellows around and watching everything they do. That sounds extremely creepy, but I just would love to be able to visit these pop-ups and pilots more. So I'm really excited to build out structures that are going to allow us to do that and allow us to let our giant 4.0 community know when and where these events are happening, so that they can kind of be there and give support and just show up for folks.
Because we have over 1,000 people in our community now, which is crazy. And just really beautiful to see all of the different ways that people are interacting with each other and just loving each other, and you know, people who meet at Essentials, and then we see like photos of them with each other's kids and picking up each other's kids from school in the same city, and just the ways that people show up for each other has been, to me, just the most exciting thing to see.
Totally. I think this is just a really special community in that way, where, you know, we've both worked with other nonprofit organizations, and a lot of times community is really just nothing more than a buzzword. And it really feels like the community has a voice here, and I know that we as an organization are actively trying to kind of quiet our voice, despite this podcast. So it's really cool to be part of a community that actually does feel that way and comes up with these kind of natural connections for people across like where they're living and what kind of idea they're working on, or if they're both building schools or both working with like a similar population of students. It's just really cool to see those connections pop up. It feels really special.
Yeah. It does. What a great group of people we have. We've been doing the Cohort Calls post-camp and are transitioning to an experiment of having the alums run the Cohort Calls, so I'm not even going to be on any of the ones from the rest of the semester. And so it's exciting to see all of the ways that we can, cut out the gatekeeping, which I think is part of like what 4.0 is about, is destroying gatekeeping to resources and money and all these other things, and yet we are also gatekeepers. So how can we distribute power and
and it's really about like access. So I know that we've both gotten to be involved with hiring alumni to help out with things where normally we might have that as like an open application, and instead just making sure that we're pulling in on the experts we have in the community, and always thinking of ways that, we can kind of like release the power from being held at the organizational level and try and move it more towards the folks who are actually on the ground doing the work.
Yeah, for sure. We had so many... I don't even know. I wish I knew this number off the top of my head, but I think I probably got Play-Doh all over my face just now.
You did.
Okay, thanks. So many alums as coaches for Essentials this semester, because we've always had the coaches on Friday, and then last semester, or 2 semesters ago, we started incorporating coaches on Saturday for pop-up plans, and then this semester, we incorporated coaches who continue on to coach through the pop-up itself. And those coaches are all over the country and just provide incredible feedback and just are so supportive and understand what our fellows are going through and how this process can feel. That it's just been really wonderful to see the intuitive ways that they know to support each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Trying to stop myself, but I can't. It's very exciting. I mean, I think this is part of why I love this work so much, is getting to see those connections, kind of help foster them, and be able to like remove myself from the equation. Something Austin hears me say a lot is that I just don't want my ego involved in the work, and I feel like that's a really fun challenge. To be able to say it's not about me and what I'm doing, but it's about all of these amazing people who are putting themselves out there with these crazy, big, bold ideas and taking the risk and putting themselves out there and leaning into that vulnerability. And it just makes me want to show up for them the best that I can.
Yeah. And I
Plus we have Play-Doh.
Yeah, plus we have Play-Doh.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, and I think about the ways that like what you just said is so much of what we ask our fellows to do, and how we are and can be even more deliberate about using those frameworks as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the number one thing, right? Is like, it's not about you, what do your users want?
Right. Exactly. I think in general, 4.0 is kind of in this space of like really trying to take our own medicine. I know this is something we've talked about with equity work and trying to make sure that we focus a little bit more on our team before trying to lead things for fellows. And I think in general, just trying to follow our own advice of like, start small, test it in like a low stakes way and go from there. And it's really cool to be part of an organization that thinks that way and encourages us to use our time that way.
Yeah, and that we get to have those experiments that we talk about in our retreats, like designer experiments for every semester, and that we're able to, there's the grace and space that like some of them aren't going to work out, and that's okay, because that's also what we expect from our fellows. It's fine to invalidate that assumption. Now you've learned something. Great.
And I don't know about for you, but for me that has been one of the like biggest changes for me in this 1 year kind of anniversary of working with 4.0 is I definitely identify as a very anxious person, fairly neurotic, and I tend to get really hung up on results and if things are perfect or not, and working with 4.0 has allowed me to not just talk about growth mindset, but really apply that to myself. And not to say that I'm not anxious. I was very anxious to do this. But it's really cool to be part of an organization that pushes me to think of things more as, okay, this is an opportunity for growth and for learning. And even if it's like a hot, shitty mess and a huge failure, that's okay, because you're going to learn something from it, which is just a really nice level of freedom.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the last few weeks, how have you been? Well, I'll speak for myself. For me, I've been spending my time doing a lot of research for what kind of infrastructure we can build between now and through the spring for the fall, and I totally lost my train of thought. Great.
Do you want me to tell a joke in the meantime?
Yeah, please.
Okay. What do you call a fake noodle?
What, Rachel?
An impasta.
Thanks. Yeah, that was really good. Didn't find my train of thought, but I'm really glad that happened.
Good. I'm glad I could share that with everyone. That feels important. So.
I did. Yeah. Okay. Got it. To be able to have the space to just like research and be like, here's a bunch of ideas for what we can do. Here's the feedback that has influenced these potential changes. And to, some of it might be crap. But I'm going to just try to crank out as much as I can to get enough feedback. And continuously get feedback from our fellows until we have the thing that they most want.
Yeah. And I think about that even in terms of the feedback that we are able to give each other and that same freedom to explore different things and topics that we're interested in. I think before I had thought of professional development as like, I'm going to a conference. And sometimes that's what that looks like. But there's freedom to have that look a lot of different ways. Yeah. So I've been taking 2 hours a week to just do personal equity work, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I've been doing that for a couple months now, actually.
That's so cool.
That's the kind of thing where in another organization I wouldn't even think to bring it up. Yeah. And here I feel like I'm really kind of pushed and encouraged to find what I'm interested in or curious about and to kind of like run towards that full speed.
Yeah, that's really cool professional development work. So what kind of resources have you been utilizing for your personal equity?
It's looked a little different from week to week. The past 2 or 3 weeks I've been also working on this tiny resource library. So I've been trying to kind of pull together lists of different readings that I've already started and books that have been on my list and starting to build out like an equity library for 4.0. Cool. So kind of compiling resources in that way. I also definitely would shout out Rachel Cargill, who I found through Instagram, and she is just like revolutionary, and she gives these talks on unpacking white feminism, which is something that I'm really interested in doing. And she has a challenge through her website called Do the Work, #DoTheWork. And each day has a different topic, so things like racism in our medical field or in housing or across gender, and just trying to look at white supremacy through different areas and with different resources and self-challenges too. And it's led to some really cool conversations with family members and with friends. And it's just kind of given me confidence to have uncomfortable conversations because, white folks need to learn how to get uncomfortable and talk about race.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just that's a really cool resource to share. And I appreciate that. That is definitely something I've been thinking a lot about too. As a non-Black, light-skinned person of color, all of the levels of responsibility that go with that too, of having conversations with your family or your people generally, right? And what that looks like and how we can be effective. Effective is a really bit, that's not the word that I meant, because that has so much to unpack inside of it, and that's not what I meant. But yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that. And I read, and I keep talking about this book, Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, and she talks about how our interpersonal relationships should be the small fractal version of what we want our communities to look like. And so how we can hold each other accountable and how important it is to have those friends who you can hold in love and trust and accountability to be able to have the conversations of oh, I think I fucked up in this way today, and here's what someone who will hold me accountable to that, while also we can have a bigger discussion about it and what that means and what our own biases are that we bring to the work. So thanks for bringing that up. And that's a really cool PD.
Yeah. It feels insane that I get to take 2 hours of my time each week for work, getting to do that. But it also feels why doesn't everyone get to do that? So I'm really excited to kind of keep doing that over the next few months. I'll probably do it forever because at this point it's a really important part of my weekly rhythm, and the weeks where I've skipped it, I feel differently. I just think that I always come back to advice that I actually got from a Wave 4 Tiny Fellow, which is that especially around race and equity or DEI, if we want to get buzzwordy about it, it's really easy to feel nervous about having these conversations because you don't want to mess up, but you're always going to mess up. There's always going to be a mistake. No one is perfect at that. And you just have to make sure that you are making different mistakes every time. So for me, I think about Tiny Camp, which we run every 6 months to a year, and the mistakes that we make in one need to be lessons and something to propel me to try something different the next time, because it's okay to make mistakes, but you shouldn't make the same ones over and over, which is kind of how I have been framing it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And as I'm hearing you talk about these resources you've been coming across, so as I shared at our last team meeting on Wednesday, I've been working on this Essentials Community Code. So it's what people would get even before applying to the program, sort of just what we expect from each other as a community. And one of the big ones, or the top for me, is utilizing your positions of privilege to interrupt power dynamics that reinforce systems of oppression. And so, my foot got caught, and there we go. And so I've been thinking about the way how you can say that, right? And then what does that look like? Because that's so much to learn, or so much to unlearn, and so much to so much vulnerability that's required as well. So I've also been working on this document of haven't ever done this before, here's some tips and tricks, which is not ready for I mean, it's not super useful yet, as much reading as I've been doing. And as you come across things, I would love for you to pass them along, because I would definitely like to include them in there.
Well, we can definitely collaborate on that. I just think that, we're kind of heading towards this place where I think in general, a lot of the content related to how to run a pop-up or how to run a pilot, how to plan those things well, how to start to build your team out. We have a lot of resources around those things, so it's cool to be in this space where we're now able to focus our energy and our money too to building resources where we don't have them. So how to have these conversations around like race and equity in education, especially being based here in the South, just feels like a direction that I'm really proud to be part of an organization that calls that out as important, and even though we're not doing it perfectly, is really trying to do better.
Yeah, and learning as we go.
Yes. Making new mistakes all the time.
Yeah, making new ones.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit more about what you do outside of the office, so things that take up a lot of your time when you're not working on essentials.
I've been thinking of buying a scooter, so that's going to be a new thing that's going to be taking up a lot of my time.
Just like a Razor scooter?
Like a Razor scooter. So that's coming up. Give you a little insight into my future. But my main thing, which I imagine you're alluding to, is I am a founding member of an organization in New Orleans called REJAC, the Reproductive Justice Action Collective. And we're just a group of locals and Southerners who are working together. We're all volunteer to pull together resources, so like human power and whatever else we can find, to implement projects in the community that operate within the reproductive justice framework. So we distribute free emergency contraception through a text line, which has been really cool. Because we also distribute sex ed. Louisiana, we don't have it. We have abstinence-only sex ed, which does not count. Some places do abstinence-only plus. Still not great. And so it's been really exciting to distribute the zine that we made that has just accurate sex ed and resources that we distribute through the public libraries, that we're going to just be distributing EC to more and more people and more widely. We just had a training last Saturday for more community support members, and we now have 34 people across the city who are distributing that, and condoms and pregnancy tests, and it's just pretty wild to see what that can mean when it's something that, like, we started this thing to be because we were like, we've experienced this problem not having access to these things, like, how do we create more access to it? And so we've been just super conscious about all of our literature being all gender neutral. And so to see folks who otherwise wouldn't feel comfortable accessing these resources give us feedback of, like, it was really nice to read sex ed that wasn't gendered, is really gratifying. And yeah, we've distributed to almost 90 people since mid-February, which is wild. But that's where all my time goes. Yeah. And Riverdale. I've been watching a lot of Riverdale.
Teen dramas.
It's a whole another podcast, though.
Yeah, I just think that the work that you and REJAC do is so incredible and really interesting, and I just love seeing the parallels between that work and what you're doing for Essentials, and these same ideas of giving power to folks in the community to really just leverage whatever privilege or opportunity that we have to be able to get resources to folks who wouldn't otherwise have access or feel comfortable accessing.
Yeah. And I feel like resource redistribution is something that we don't talk about very often, but is so much of what it comes down to, right? I think in especially people doing new work in education or doing anything new, like, you're made to feel like we live in a world of scarcity. Yeah. And I mean, even just in existence, in life, like, not even like with an entrepreneurial mindset. Yeah. We're made to feel that there's such scarcity, which is totally false. We live in this insane world of abundance, and it's all distributed in these really inequitable ways.
Totally. I think about that a lot. Scarcity mindset is fake. Tell your friends. But yeah, I think, I have the privilege of being a white woman in this work, which means that a lot of times the inequities that are super easy for me to spot are around like the economics of things. So looking at capitalism as a system and how that has affected education and community organizing and healthcare and all of these different things. And I'm just really happy to be at a point where I'm able to really intentionally and kind of like systematically use my like natural instinct of like calling out that bias, but now pulling in these kind of like intersections of different biases that layer onto that that don't necessarily affect me as much, but obviously compound the problem.
Yeah, and I mean, our liberation is all bound up in each other's, right? So like those intersections of education, justice, economic justice, reproductive, like trans and queer justice, all of that, and disability justice or differently abled justice, like all of those things are all going towards the same future.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I love about having fellows here is they're all coming at these problems from such different spaces. And like ultimately the problems that they're coming to, which if we're gonna get like really into it, is like racism and capitalism, right? And so the ways that people are coming at that, and to see them see their own work in each other's work, and then to say, oh, and like you're also doing this thing that I didn't even think of, and would love to incorporate in this way, has been probably my favorite thing.
We're very lucky to get to work here, and that's not just because of the snacks and the bubbles.
Oh, we don't have bubbles.
We didn't bring bubbles. I know, we really failed.
It's a
but
big missed opportunity.
I think just one thing I want to call out too is that part of why I love this job is that we are a small team of folks who are all, I think, really interesting and weird in a good way people outside of this work. And this is the first job I've ever had where I feel I can actually bring my full self to the work. And I feel like we're really encouraged to do that, which just means that we spend our time pushing each other and being able to bring our different perspectives and different senses of humor and just get to like really, I enjoy coming to work, which I think is just really special. Especially for Team Nihilist.
I know, so. Team Nihilist goes strong here, but but yeah, so it does, I completely agree. It is definitely an unusual situation to get to really care about the people that you work with and really support the work they're doing and to learn about all of the cool things. Like you worked at GroDat for a while. Like you have such an interesting, varied interests. That's so exciting to learn about. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the work that I was doing previously in public health, I was very interested, as I said earlier, in community level work, but I never really found like one particular area that I was more interested in than any other. But I think something that I kept getting drawn back to was food education, and I am kind of careful to call it food education versus like healthy eating or like nutrition, because I think nutrition can be co-opted and used for a lot of like kind of really disgusting things, where food education is really just the idea that like we are humans, we have to eat food, we should know where that food comes from and have the resources and skills to be able to do that for ourselves. So GroDat is this amazing program that is located out of City Park here in New Orleans, and they hire high school students and pay them a living wage, and they train them how to, they've got a couple different acres in City Park, and they grow lots of amazing produce. They sell it at farmers markets and through a CSA. They also get to do these incredible field trips to learn about the land that they're on and like real true stewardship of that land and kind of
So
the
cool.
food justice movement. And so it really was where I first saw the ability to tie in this level of health and food education and education in general and economic opportunity for youth who didn't have other opportunities for jobs, and just being able to pull those all together is definitely, I think, what kind of set me on this path of trying to find jobs like this one.
Very cool. Grodad has a really good Instagram
They do.
with Farmer Sean.
Farmer Sean giving his weekly updates.
Yeah, weekly updates of the farm and then tips of what and how to eat things.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's magic.
It is.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a joke?
Yes, I wish you
Okay.
would.
Okay, so I want to make sure I get it right. Okay. What does an annoying pepper do?
What?
Get jalapeno face.
That was great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. How are we on time? Do we have time to like get deep into something else, or should we
It's 3:01, so we should probably
wrap it up?
wrap.
Cool. Thanks for speaking with me. This was really fun. I learned a lot about you. I appreciate it.
Right back at you. I think this was, like I said, I was anxious to do this, but it was really cool to not just talk about the work, but really focus in on our why and what
Yeah.
brought us here and all the things that we love about this work. Because I think day to day, it's very easy to just think about the tasks that we have to do. And was just really cool to get to hear why we love it here and why
Yeah.
we do what we do.
Yeah.
So thanks for taking the time.
And for folks who have stuck it out to the end, if you want to get in contact with me, my email is marlo@4pt0.org, and that's Marlo.
And mine is Rachel at 4pt0.org, RACHEL.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.